Chapter 3 of the Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Nightland. Chapter 3 The Quiet Calling. Now oft had I heard tell, not only in that great city which occupied the 1,000th floor, but in others of the 1,320 cities of the pyramid, that there was somewhere out in the desolation of the Nightlands a second place of refuge, where had gathered in another part of this dead world some last millions of the human race, to fight unto the end. And this story I heard everywhere in my travels through the cities of the Great Redoubt, which travels began when I came upon my 17th year, and continued for 3 years and 225 days, being even then but 1 day in each city, as was the custom in the training of every child. And truly it was a great journey, and in it I met with many, whom to know was to love, but whom never could I see again, for life was not space enough, and each must to his duty to the security and well-being of the redoubt. Yet for all that I have set down, we travelled much always, but there were so many millions and so few years. And as I have said, everywhere I went there was the same story of this other place of refuge, and in such of the libraries of those cities as I had time to search, there were great numbers of works upon the existence of this other refuge, and some, far back in the years, made assertion with confidence that such a place was in verity. And indeed no doubt did there seem in those bygone ages. But now these very records were read only by scholars, who doubted even whilst they read, and so is it ever. But of the reality of this refuge I had never a sound doubt, from the day of my hearing concerning it from our master Monstruaken, who with all his assistants occupied the tower of observation in the apex of the pyramid. And here let me tell that he and I had always an affinity and close friendship one for the other, though he was full grown and I but a youth. But so it was, and thus when I had come to an age of 21 years of life, he opened to me a post within the tower of observation, and this was a most wondrous good fortune to me, for in all the vast redoubt to be appointed to the tower of observation was the most desired. For thereby, even as in these days doth astronomy, was the natural curiosity of man eased somewhat, even while thwarted. Now let me tell here also, lest it be thought that I was unduly favoured because of my friendship with the master Monstruaken, that there was a sound justification for his choice, in that to me had been given that strange gift of hearing, which we called night-hearing, though this was but a fanciful name and meant little. Yet the peculiar gift was rare, and in all the millions of the pyramid there was none with the gift to a great degree, saving only myself. And I, because of this gift, could hear the invisible vibrations of the ether, so that without harking to the calling of our recording instruments, I could take the messages which came continually through the eternal darkness, aye, even better than they. And now it may be the better understood how much was to be counted that I had grown to listen for a voice that had not rung in mine ears for an eternity, and yet which sang sweet and clear in my memory dreams, so that it seemed to me that Murdath the Beautiful slept within my soul and whispered to me out of all the ages. And then one day at the 15th hour, when began the sleep-time, I had been pondering this love of mine that lived with me still, and marvelling that my memory dreams held the voice of a love that had been in so remote an age. And pondering and dreaming thus as a young man may, I could fancy this aeon-lost one were whispering beauty into my ears in verity, so clear had my memory grown, and so much had I pondered. And lo, as I stood there, harking and communing with my thoughts, I thrilled suddenly, as if I had been smitten, for out of all the everlasting night a whisper was thrilling and thrilling upon my more subtle hearing. Through 4 long years had I listened, since that awakening in the embrasure, when but a youth of 17. And now, out of the world darkness and all the eternal years of that lost life, which now I live in this present age of ours, was the whisper come. For I knew it upon that instant. And yet, because I was so taught to wisdom, I answered by no name, but sent the master word through the night, sending it with my brain elements, as I could, and as all may, much or little as may be, if they be not clods. And, moreover, I knew that she who called quietly would have the power to hear without instruments, if indeed it were she. And if it were but one of the false callings of the evil forces, or more cunning monsters, or, as was sometimes thought concerning these callings, the house of silence meddling with our souls, then would they have no power to say the master word, for this had been proven through all the everlasting. And lo, as I stood, trembling and striving not to be tense, which destroys the receptivity, there came thrilling round and round my spiritual essence the throb of the master word, beating steadily in the night, as doth that marvellous sound. And then, with all that was sweet in my spirit, I called with my brain elements, Murdath, Murdath, Murdath. And at that instant the master Monstruaken entered that part of the tower of observation where I stood, and seeing my face, stood very quiet. For though he had not the power of night-hearing, he was wise and thoughtful, and took much account of my gift. Moreover, he had but come from the receiving instrument, and thought vaguely to have caught the throb of the master word, though too faint to come proper through the instrument, so that he searched for me, in that I, who had the hearing, might listen for it, I being, as I have said, gifted in that wise. And to him I told something of my story, and my thoughts and my memories, and of that awakening. And thus up to this present happening, and he hearkened with sympathy and a troubled and wondering heart, for in that age a man might talk sanely upon that which, in this age of ours, would be accounted foolishness, and maybe the breathings of insanity. For there, by the refinement of arts of mentality and the results of strange experiments and the accomplishment of learning, men were able to conceive of matters now close to our conceptions, even as we of this day may happily give a calm ear to talk, that in the days of our fathers would have been surely set to the count of lunacy. And this is very clear. And all the while that I told my story, I listened with my spirit, but save for a sense of faint, happy laughter that wrapped about me, I heard naught, and nothing more all that day. Here let me put down that, because of my memories and half-memories, I would time and again dispute with our learned men, they being in doubt as to the verity of that olden story of the days of light, and the existence of the sun, though something of all this was set out, as of truth, in our oldest records. But I, remembering, told them many tales that seemed fairy-like to them, and entranced their hearts, even whilst I angered their brains, which refused to take seriously and as verity that which their hearts accepted gladly, even as we receive the wonder of poetry into our souls. But the master Monstruaken would listen to aught I had to tell, aye, though I spoke through hours, and so it would be odd times that, having talked long, drawing my stories from my memory dreams, I would come back again into the present of that future, and lo, all the Monstruakens would have left their instruments and observations and recordings, and be gathered about me. And the master so sunken in interest that he not to have discovered them. Neither had I noticed, being so full of the things which had been. But when the master came back to knowledge of that present, he would rouse and chide, and they, all those lesser ones, would fly swiftly and guiltily to their various works. And yet, so I have thought since, each with a muddled and bewildered and thoughtful air upon him, and hungry they were for more, and ever wondering and setting questions about. And so it was also with those others, those learned ones who were not of the tower of observation, and who disbelieved even whilst they hungered. Listen would they, though I talked from the first hour, which was the dawn, to the 15th hour, which was the beginning of the night. For the sleep-time was set thus, after other usage and experiment. And, odd whiles, I found that there were among them men of extraordinary learning who upheld my tellings as tales of verity, and so there was a faction. But later there grew more to believe, and whether they believed or not all were ready to listen, so that I might have spended my days in talk, only that I had my work to do. But the Master Monstruaken believed from the beginning, and was wise always to understand, so that I loved him for this, as for many another dear quality. And so, as may be conceived, among all those millions I was singled out to be known, for the stories that I told went downward through 1,000 cities, and presently, in the lowest tier of the underground fields, 100 miles deep in the earth below the redoubt, I found that the very ploughboys knew something concerning my tellings, and gathered about me one time and another when the Master Monstruaken and I had gone down, regarding some matter that dealt with the earth current and our instruments. And of the underground fields, though in that age we called them no more than the fields, I should set down a little, for they were the mightiest work of this world, so that even the last redoubt was but a small thing beside them. 100 miles deep lay the lowest of the underground fields, and was 100 miles from side to side every way, and above it there were 306 fields, each one less in area than that beneath, and in this wise they tapered, until the topmost field which lay direct beneath the lowermost floor of the great redoubt was but 4 miles every way. And thus it will be seen that these fields, lying one beneath the other, formed a mighty and incredible pyramid of country lands in the deep earth, 100 miles from the base unto the topmost field. And the whole was sheathed in at the sides with the grey metal of which the redoubt was builded, and each field was pillared and floored beneath the soil with the same compound of wonder, and so was it secure, and the monsters could not dig into that mighty garden from without. And all of that underground land was lit, where needed, by the earth current, and that same life-stream fructified the soil, and gave life and blood to the plants and to the trees and to every bush and natural thing. And the making of those fields had taken maybe 1,000,000 years, and the dump thereof had been cast into the crack, whence came the earth current, and which had bottom beyond all soundings. And this underground country had its own winds and air currents, so that to my memory it was in no ways connected to the monstrous air shafts of the pyramid. But in this I may be mistaken, for it has not been given to me to know all that is to be known concerning that vast redoubt, nor by any one man could so much knowledge be achieved. Yet that there were wise and justly promoted winds in that underground country I do know, for healthful and sweet they were, and in the cornfields there was the sweet rustle of grain, and in the glad silken laughter of poppies, all beneath a warm and happy light. And here did the millions walk and take excursion, and go orderly or not, even as in these days. And all this have I seen, and the talk of 1,000 lovers in the gardens of that place comes back to me, and with it all the memory of my dear one, and of a faint calling that would seem to whisper about me at times, but so faint and attenuated that even I, who had the night hearing, could not catch its import, and so went listening ever the more intently, and ofttimes calling. Now there was a law in the pyramid, tried and healthful, which held that no male should have freedom to adventure into the Nightland before the age of 22, and no female ever. Yet that, after such age, if a youth desired greatly to make the adventure, he should receive 3 lectures upon the dangers of which we had knowledge, and a strict account of the mutilatings and horrid deeds done to those who had so adventured. And if after this had passed over him he still desired, and if he were accounted healthful and sane, then should he be allowed to make the adventure, and it was accounted honour to the youth who should add to the knowledge of the pyramid. But to all such as went forth into the danger of the Nightland, there was set beneath the skin of the inner side of the left forearm a small capsule, and when the wound had healed, then might the youth make the adventure. And the wherefore of this was that the spirit of the youth might be saved, if he were entrapped, for then, upon the honour of his soul, must he bite forth the capsule, and immediately his spirit would have safety in death. And by this shall you know somewhat the grim and horrid danger of the Dark Land. And this I have set down because later I was to make huge adventure into those lands, and even at this time some thought of the same had come to me, for always I went listening for that quiet calling, and twice I sent the master-word throbbing solemnly through the everlasting night. Yet this I did no more without certainty, for the word must not be used lightly. But often would I say with my brain elements, "Murdath! Murdath!" sending the name out into the darkness, and sometimes would I seem to hear the faint thrilling of the ether around me, as though one answered, but weakly, as it were with a weakened spirit, or by instrument that lacked its earth force. And thus for a great while there was no certainty, but only a strange anxiousness and no clear answer. Then one day, as I stood by the instruments in the tower of observation, at the 13th hour there came the thrilling of beaten ether all about me, as it were that all the void was disturbed. And I made the sign for silence, so that the men moved not in all the tower, but bowed over their breathing bells, that all disturbance might cease. And again came the gentle thrilling, and broke out into a clear, low calling in my brain. And the calling was my name, the old earth name of this day, and not the name of that age. And the name smote me with a frightenness of fresh awakening memories. And immediately I sent the master-word into the night, and all the ether was full of movement, and a silence came, and later a beat afar off in the void of a night which only I in all that great redoubt could hear, until the heavier vibrations were come. And in a moment there was all about me the throbbing of the master-word, beating in the night a sure answer. Yet before this I knew that Murdath had called, but now had surety. And immediately I said, "Murdath," making use of the instruments, and there came a swift and beautiful answer. For out of the dark there stole an old love-name that she only had ever used to me. And presently I minded me of the men, and signed to them that they should continue, for the records must not be broken, and now I had the communication full established. And by me stood the Master Monstruaken, quietly as any young Monstruaken, waiting with slips to make any notes that were needful, and keeping a strict eye upon those others, but not unkindly. And so, for a space of wonder, I had speech with the girl out in the darkness of the world, who had knowledge of my name, and of the old earth love-name, and named herself Murdath. And much I questioned her, and presently, to my sorrow, for it seemed that her name was not truly Murdath, but Nani, neither had she known my name, but that in the library of that place where she abode there had been a story of one named by my name, and called by that sweet love-name which she had sent out somewhat ruthless into the night, and the girl's name had been Murdath, and when first she, Nani, had called, there had come back to her a cry of Murdath, Murdath. And this had minded her so strangely of that olden story which had stayed in her memory, that she had answered as the maid in that book might have answered. And thus did it seem that the utter romance of my memory-love had vanished, and I stood strangely troubled for sorrow of a love of olden times. Yet even then I marvelled that any book should have stories so much like to mine, yet heeding that the history of all love is writ with one pen. Yet even then, in that hour of my strange and quaintly foolish pain, there came a thing that set me thrilling, though more afterwards, when I came to think afresh upon it. For the girl who spoke to me through the night had made some wonder that my voice were not deeper, yet in quiet fashion, and as one who says a thing scarce wotting what they say. But even to me then there came a sudden hope, for in the olden days of this present age my voice had been very deep. And I said to her that maybe the man in the book was said to have had a deep tone of speech, but she, seeming puzzled, said nay, and at that I questioned her the more, but only to the trouble of her memory and understanding. And strange must it seem that we two should talk on so trivial a matter, when there was so much else that we had need to exchange thought upon. For were a man in this present day to have speech with those who may live within that red planet of Mars within the sky, scarce could the wonder of it exceed the wonder of a human voice coming through that night unto the great redoubt, out of all that lost darkness. For indeed this must have been the breaking of maybe 1,000,000 years of silence. And already, as I came to know later, was the news passing downward from city to city through all the vast pyramid, so that the hour-slips were full of the news, and every city eager and excited and waiting. And I better known in that one moment than in all my life before, for that previous calling had been but vaguely put about, and then set to the count of a nature blown upon over-easily by spirit-winds of the half-memory of dreams. Though it is indeed true, as I have set down before this, that my tales concerning the early days of the world, when the sun was visible and full of light, had gone down through all the cities, and had much comment and setting forth in the hour-slips, and were a cause for speech and argument. Now concerning the voice of this girl coming to us through the darkness of the world, I will set out that which she had to tell, and this indeed but verified the tellings of our most ancient records, which had so long been treated over lightly. There was, it would seem, somewhere out in the lonesome dark of the outer lands, but at what distance none could ever discover, a second redoubt, that was a 3-sided pyramid, and moderate small, being no more than a mile in height, and scarce 3/4 of a mile along the bases. When this redoubt was first builded, it had been upon the far shore of a sea, where now was no sea, and it had been raised by those wandering humans who had grown weary of wandering, and weary of the danger of night attacks by the tribes of half-human monsters, which began to inhabit the earth even so early as the days when the half-gloom was upon the world. And he that had made the plan upon which it was builded was one who had seen the great redoubt, having lived there in the beginning, but escaped because of a correction set upon him for his spirit of irresponsibility, which had made him to cause disturbance among the orderly ones in the lowest city of the great redoubt. Yet in time he too had come to be tamed by the weight of fear of the ever-growing hordes of monsters and the forces that were abroad. And so he, being a master spirit, planned and builded the smaller redoubt, being aided thereto by 4 millions, who also were weary of the harass of the monsters, but until then had been wanderers, because of the restlessness of their blood. And they had chosen that place because there they had discovered a sign of the earth-current in a great valley which led to the shore. For without the earth-current no refuge could have existence. And whilst many builded and guarded and cared for the great camp in which all lived, others worked within a great shaft, and in 10 years had made this to a distance of many miles, and therewith they tapped the earth-current, but not a great stream, yet a sufficiency, as was believed. And presently, after many years, they had builded the pyramid, and taken up their refuge there, and made them instruments and ordained monstruagons, so that they had speech daily with the Great Pyramid, and thus for many long ages. And the earth-current then to begin to fail, and though they labored through many thousands of years, they came to no better resource. And so it was they ceased to have communication with the great redoubt, for the current had a lack of power to work the instruments, and the recording instruments ceased to be sensible of our messages. And thereafter came 1,000,000 years maybe of silence, with ever the birthing and marrying and dying of those lonesome humans. And they grew less, and some put this to the lack of the earth-current, which dwindled slowly through the centuries of that eternity. And once in 1,000 years maybe one among them would be sensitive, and able to hear beyond ordinary. And to these at times there would seem to come the thrilling of the ether, so that such an one would go listening, and sometimes seem to catch half messages, and so awaken a great interest in all the pyramid. And there would be turning up of old records, and many words and writings, and attempts to send the master word through the night, in which doubtless sometimes they succeeded, for there was set down in the records of the great redoubt certain occasions on which there had come the call of the master word, which had been arranged and made holy between the two redoubts in the early days of that second life of this world. Yet now for 100,000 years there had been none sensitive, and in that time the people of the pyramid had become no more than 10,000, and the earth-current was weak and powerless to put the joy of life into them, so that they went listlessly, but deemed it not strange, because of so many eons of usage. And then, to the wonder of all, the earth-current had put forth a new power, so that young people ceased to be old over-soon, and there was happiness and a certain joy in the living, and a strange birthing of children, such as had not been through 500,000 years. And then came a new thing. Nani, the daughter of the master monstruacan of that redoubt, had shown to all that she was sensitive, for she had perceived odd vibrations afloat in the night, and concerning these she told her father, and presently, because their blood moved afresh in their bodies, they had heart to discover the plans of the ancient instruments, for the instruments had long rusted and been forgotten. And so they builded them a new instrument to send forth a message, for they had no memory at that time that the brain elements had power to do thus, though mayhap their brain elements were weakened through so many ages of starvation of the earth-current, and could not have obeyed, even had their masters known all that we of the great redoubt knew. And when the instrument was finished, to Nani was given the right to call first across the dark to discover whether, indeed, after that 1,000,000 years of silence, they were yet companied upon this earth, or whether they were in truth lonely, the last poor thousands of the humans. And a great and painful excitement came upon the people of the Lesser Pyramid, for the loneliness of the world pressed upon them, and it was to them as though we in this age called to a star across the abyss of space. And because of the excitement and pain of the moment, Nani called only vaguely with the instrument into the dark, and lo, in a moment, as it seemed, there came all about her in the night the solemn throb of the master word, beating in the night. And Nani cried out that she was answered, and, as may be thought, many of the people wept, and some prayed, and some were silent, but others beseeched her that she call again and quickly to have further speech with those of their kind. And Nani spoke the master word into the night, and directly there came a calling all about her, "Murdath! Murdath!" and the strange wonder of it made her silent a moment. But when she would have made reply, the instrument had ceased to work, and she could have no further speech at that time. This, as may be thought, occasioned much distress, and constant work they had between the instrument and the earth-current to discover the reason for this failing, but could not for a great while. And in that time oft did Nani hear the call of Murdath thrilling about her, and twice there came the solemn beat of their master word in the night. Yet never had she the power to answer. and all that while, as I learned in time, was she stirred with a quaint ache at heart by the voice that called Murdath as it might be the spirit of love. Searching for its mate, for this is how she put it. And thus it chanced that the constant thrilling of this name about her woke her to memory of a book she had read in early years, but half understood, for it was ancient and writ in an olden fashion, and it set out the love of a man and a maid, and the maid's name was Murdath. And so, because she was full of this great awakening of those ages of silence, and the calling of that name, she found the book again, and read it many times, and grew to a sound love of the beauty of that tale. And presently, when the instrument was made right, she called into the night the name of that man within the book. And so it came about that I had hoped too much, yet even now was I strangely unsure whether to cease from hoping. And one other thing there is which I would make clear. Many and oft a time had I heard a thrilling of sweet, faint laughter about me, and the stirring of the ether by words too gentle to come clearly, and these, I make no doubt, came from Nanni, using her brain elements unwittingly and in ignorance, but very eager to answer my callings, and having no knowledge that far off across the blackness of the world they thrilled about me constantly. And after Nanni had made clear all that I have set out concerning the Lesser Refuge, she told further how that food was not plentiful with them, though until the reawakening of the earth-current they had gone unknowing of this, being of small appetite, and caring little for aught. But now, wakened and newly hungry, they savoured a lack of taste in all that they ate, and this we could well conceive from our reasonings and theory, but happily not from our knowledge. And we said unto them that the soil had lost its life, and the crops therefrom were not vital, and a great while it would take for the earth within their pyramid to receive back the life elements. And we told them certain ways by which they might bring a more speedy life to the soil, and this they were eager to do, being freshly alive after so long a time of half-life. And now you must know that in all the great redoubt the story went downwards swiftly, and was published in all the hour-sheets, with many comments, and the libraries were full of those who would look up the olden records, which for so long had been forgotten, or taken, as we of this day would say, with a pinch of salt. And all the time I was pestered with questions, so that, had I not been determined, I should scarce have been allowed to sleep. Moreover, so much was writ about me and my power to hear, and the diverse stories concerning tales of love, that I had been like to have grown mazed to take note of it all. Yet some note I did take, and much I found pleasant, but some displeasing. And for the rest, I was not spoiled, as the saying goes, for I had my work to do. Moreover, I was always busy listening, and having speech through the darkness. Though if any saw me so, they would question, and because of this I kept much to the tower of observation, where was the master Monstroachin and a greater discipline. And then began a fresh matter, though but an old enough trick, for I speak now of the days that followed that reopening of the talk between the pyramids. Oft would speech come to us out of the night, and there would be tales of the sore need of the lesser redoubt, and callings for help. Yet when I sent the master-word abroad, there would be no answering, and so I feared that the monsters and forces of evil knew. Yet at times the master-word would answer to us, beating steadily in the night, and when we questioned afresh, we knew that they in the lesser redoubt had caught the beat of the master-word, and so made reply, though it had not been they who had made the previous talk, which we had sought to test by the word. And then they would make contradiction of all that had been spoken so cunningly, so that we knew that monsters and forces had sought to tempt some from the safety of the redoubt. Yet was this no new thing, as I have made to hint, saving that it grew now to a greater persistence, and there was a loathsome cunning in the using of this new language to the making of wicked and false messages by those evil things of the Nightland. and it told to us, as I have made remark, how that those monsters and forces had a full awareness of the speech between the pyramids, yet could they have no power to say the master word. So had we some test left, and a way to sure knowledge of what may talk in the night. And all that I have told you should bring to those of this age something of the yet unbegotten terror of that, and a quiet and sound thankfulness to God that we suffer not as humanity shall yet suffer. But for all this, let it not be thought that they of that age accounted it as suffering, but as no more than the usual of human existence. And by this may we know that we can meet all circumstances, and use ourselves to them and live through them wisely, if we be but prudent and consider means of invention. And through all the Nightland there was an extraordinary awakening among the monsters and forces, so that the instruments made constant note of greater powers at work out there in the darkness, and the monstruacans were busied recording and keeping a very strict watch. And so was there at all that time a sense of difference and awakening, and of wonders about and to come. And from the country whence comes the great laughter, the laughter sounded constant, as it were an uncomfortable and heart-shaking voice-thunder rolling thence over the lands, out from the unknown east. And the pit of the red smoke filled all the deep valley with redness, so that the smoke rose above the edge and hid the bases of the towers upon the far side. And the giants could be seen plentiful around the kilns to the east, and from the kilns great belches of fire, though the meaning of it, as all else, we could not say, but only the cause. And from the mountain of the voice, which rose to the southeast of the southeast watcher, and of which I have made no telling hitherto in this faulty setting out, I heard for the first time in that life the calling of the voice, and though the records made mention of it, yet not often was it heard. And the calling was shrill, and very peculiar, and distressful, and horrible, as though a giant woman, hungering strangely, shouted unknown words across the night. And this was how it seemed to me, and many thought this to describe the sound. And by all this you may perceive how that land was awakened. And other tricks there were to entice us into the Nightland, and once a call came thrilling in the ether, and told to us that certain humans had escaped from the lesser redoubt and drew nigh to us, but were faint for food and craved succor. Yet when we sent the master word into the night, the creatures without could make no reply, which was a very happy thing for our souls, for we had been all mightily exercised in our hearts by this one message, and now had proof that it was but a trap. And constantly and at all hours I would have speech with Nani and of the lesser redoubt, for I had taught her how she might send her thoughts through the night with her brain elements, but not to overuse this power, for it exhausts the body and the powers of the mind if it be abused by exceeding usage. Yet, despite that I had taught her the use of her brain elements, she sent her message always without strength, save when she had use of the instrument, and this I set to the cause that she had not the health force needful. But apart from this, she had the night hearing very keen, though less than mine. And so, with many times of speech and constant tellings of our doings and thoughts, we drew near in the spirit to one another, and had always a feeling in our hearts that we had been given previous acquaintance. And this, as may be thought, thrilled my heart very strangely. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, Part 1 of The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Nightland. Chapter 4. The Hushing of the Voice, Part 1. Dearest, thine own feet tread the world at night, treading as moonflakes step across a dark, kissing the very dew to holier light. thy voice a song past mountains, which to hark frightens my soul with an utter lost delight. Now one night towards the end of the 16th hour, as I made ready to sleep, there came all about me the thrilling of the ether, as happened oft in those days, but the thrilling had a strange power in it, and in my soul the voice of Nanni sounded plain, all within and about me. Yet though I knew it to be the voice of Nanni, I answered not immediately, save to send the sure question of the master-word into the night. And directly I heard the answer, the master-word beating steadily in the night, and I questioned Nanni why she had speech with me by the instrument at that time, when all were sleeping, and the watch set among the Monstruacans. For they in the little pyramid had their sleep-time to commence at the 11th hour, so that by this it was 5 hours advanced toward the time of waking, and Nanni should have slept, nor have been abroad to the tower of observation, apart from her father. For I suppose that she spoke by the instrument, her voice sounding very clear in my brain. Yet to this question she made no answer in kind, but gave a certain thing into my spirit, which set me trembling, for she said certain words that began, "Dearest, thine own feet tread the world at night." And it well may be that she set me to tremble, for as the words grew about me, there wakened a memory-dream how that I had made these same words to Murdath the Beautiful in the long-gone eternity of this our age, when she had died and left me alone in all the world. And I was weak a little with the tumult and force of my emotion. But in a moment I called eagerly with my brain elements to Nanni to give some explaining of this thing that she had spoken to the utter troubling of my heart. Yet once more she made no direct answer, but spoke the words again to me across all the dark of the world. And it came to me suddenly that it was not Nanni that spoke, but Murdath the Beautiful, from out of all the everlasting night. And I called, "Murdath! Murdath!" with my brain elements, into the night. And lo, the far, faint voice spoke again to my spirit through all the darkness of eternity, saying again those words. Yet though the voice was the voice of Murdath the Beautiful, it was also the voice of Nanni, and I knew in all my heart that this thing was in verity, and that it had been given to me to be birthed once more into this world in the living time of that only one, with whom my spirit and essence hath mated in all ages through the everlasting. And I called with my brain elements and all my strength to Nanni, but there came no answer, neither sign of hearing, though through hours I called. And thus at last I came to an utter exhaustion, but neither could be quiet nor sleep. Yet presently I slept. And when I waked, my first memory was of the wondrous thing which had befallen in the sleep-time, for none in all this world could have known those words, save it had been the spirit of Murdath, my beautiful one, looking from above my shoulder in that utter lost time, as I made those words to her out of an aching and broken heart. And the voice had been the voice of Murdath, and the voice of Murdath had been the voice of Nanni. And what shall any say to this save that which I had in my heart? And immediately I called to Nanni once and again twice, and in a little moment there came all about me the throbbing of the master-word, beating solemnly in the night. And I sent the master-word to give assurance, and immediately the voice of Nanni, a little weak, as was it always when she had not the instrument, but sent the message with her brain elements. And I answered her, and questioned her eagerly concerning her sayings of the past time of sleep. But she disclaimed, and made clear to me that she had no knowledge of having spoken, but had slept through all that time of which I made to tell, and indeed had dreamed a very strange dream. And for a little while I was confused, and meditated, not knowing what to think, but came suddenly again to a knowledge that Nanni's far voice was thrilling the ether all about, and that she would tell to me her dream, which had set strong upon her mind. And she told the dream to me, and in the dream she had seen a tall, dark man, built very big, and dressed in unfamiliar clothing. And the man had been in a little room, and very sorrowful and lonesome, and in her dream she had gone nigh to him. And presently the man made to write, that he might ease him by giving expression to his sorrow. And Nanni had been able to read the words that he wrote, though to her waking spirit the language in which they were writ was strange and unknown. Yet she could not remember what he had writ, save but one short line, and this she had mind of, in that he had writ the word Murdath above. And she spoke of the strangeness of this thing, that she should dream of this name, but supposed that I had fixed it upon her by my first callings. And then did I, with something of a tremble in my spirit, ask Nanni to tell me what she remembered of the writing of that big, sorrowful stranger. And in a little moment her far voice said these words all about me: "Dearest, thine own feet tread the world at night." But no more had she memory of, yet it was a sufficiency, and I, maybe with a mad, strange triumph in my soul, said unto her with my brain elements that which remained of those words. And my spirit felt them strike upon the spirit of Nanni, and awake her memory, as with the violence of a blow. And for a little while she stumbled, dumb before so much newness and certainly. And her spirit then to waken, and she near wept with the fright and the sudden new wonder of this thing. And immediately all about me there came her voice thrilling, and the voice was the voice of Murdath, and the voice of Nanni. And I heard the tears of her spirit make pure and wonderful the bewildered and growing gladness of her far voice. And she asked me, as one who had suddenly opened the gates of memory, whether she might be truly Murdath. And I, utter weak and shaken strangely because of this splendour of fulfilment, could make no instant answer. And she asked again, but using mine old love-name, and with a sureness in her far voice. And still I was so strangely dumb, and the blood to thud peculiar in mine ears, and this to pass, and speech to come swift. And this way to be that meeting of our spirits across all the everlasting night. And you shall have for a memory picture how that Nanni stood there in the world in that far eternity, and with her spirit having speech with mine, looking back through the part-opened gates of her memory into the past of this our life and age. Yet more than this she saw, and more than was given to me in that age. For she had memory now and sight of other instances, and of other comings together, which had some confusion and but half meanings to me. Yet of this our present age and life we spoke as of some yesterday, but very hallowed. Now, as may be conceived, the wonder of this surety which had come into my life stirred me fiercely to its completion, for all my heart and spirit cried out to be with that one who was Murdath, and now spoke with the voice of Nanni. Yet how should this be won? For none among all the learned men of that mighty pyramid knew the position of the Lesser Redoubt, neither could the records and histories of the world give us that knowledge. Only that there was a general thought among the students and the Monstruacans that it lay between the northwest and the northeast. But no man had any surety. Neither could any conceive of the distance from us of that refuge. And counting all this, there was yet the incredible danger and peril of the Nightland, and the hunger and desolation of the outer lands, which were sometimes named the Unknown Lands. And I spoke much with Nanni concerning this matter of their position. Yet neither she nor her father, the master Monstruacan of that refuge, had any knowing either of our position, only that the builder of the Lesser Redoubt had come out of the southward world in the beginning, as they had knowledge of by the records. Also the father of Nanni set that ancient compass to bear, for, as he made explanation to us through the instrument, so great a power of the earth-current must be ours that perchance it was our force which did affect the pointer from steadfastness. For indeed the needle did swing in an arc, as we heard, that held between the north and the south, within the westward arc. But this it had done ever with them, and so was a very helpless guide, save that maybe, as we had thought, the force of the earth-current that was with us had in truth some power to pull the needle towards us. And if this were so of verity, we made a reckoning that set the Lesser Redoubt to the north, and they did likewise, and put us to the south. Yet it was all built upon the sand of guesswork, and nothing to adventure the life and soul upon. Now we of curiosity, though a million times had it been done in the past ages, set the compass before us, having it from the great museum. But as ever in that age, it did spin if we but stirred the needle, and would stop nowheres with surety, for the flow of the earth-current from the crack beneath the pyramid had a power to affect it away from the north, and to set it wandering. And this may seem very strange to this present age, yet to that it was most true to the seeming nature of things, and harder to believe that ever it did once point steadfastly, to prove a guide of sureness and unfailing. For, be it known, we knew the positions of the land by tradition, coming from that ancient time when in the half-gloom they had builded the pyramid. They, having known the use of that ancient compass, and with sight of the sun had named the positions, though we of that far future day had forgotten the very beginnings of those names of direction, and used them but because our fathers did a million years and more. And likewise we did the same with the names of the day and the night and the weeks and the months and the years, though of the visible markings of these there was nothing but only and always the everlasting night, yet the same seeming very natural to that people. Now Nanni, having heed to my constant questions, craved with an utter keen hunger that I might come to her, but yet forbade it, in that it were better to live and commune in the spirit than to risk my soul, and mayhaps die, in the foolishness of trying to find her in all the darkness of the dead world. Yet no heed had I taken of her commands, had I but known of a surety the direction in which she might be discovered, and gained some knowledge of the space between, for this might be named by thousands of miles, or but by hundreds, though a great distance it was surely. Yet one other thing there was that has point in this place. For when I sent my speech out into the night, using my brain elements, I came to know that, whether I had a knowledge of the north or no knowledge at the moment, yet did I turn oft with a sure instinction to that direction. And of this the Master Monstruaken took very great note, and had me to experiment many a time and way, and so enclosed me about with screens, or with bandages across mine eyes, that I could not, save by that inward knowing, have any knowledge to point me the way. Yet would I turn northwards very frequent, by a certain feeling, and seemed unable of speech, if I were turned otherwise by force. But when we asked Nanni whether she had an unusualness in this matter, she could discover none, and we could but take note curiously of that which affected my habits, and which truly I set to the attracting of her spirit. For I had mind that she did be somewheres out that way in the darkness of the world, but yet was this no more than to suppose, as you perceive. And the Master Monstruaken wrote a study of this matter of the northwardness of my turning, and it was set out in the hour-slips of the Tower of Observation. And so it came to be copied by the hour-slips of the great cities, and made much comment and much calling up to me through the home instruments, so that with this, and the speech that went about concerning my powers to hear, I was much in talk, and diversely pleased and oft angered by overmuch attention and importunity. And now, whilst I pondered this matter in all my spirit and being, how that I should some way come to Nanni, there befell a very terrible thing, and in this wise must I tell it. It was at the 17th hour, when all the millions of the mighty pyramid slept, that I was with the Master Monstruaken in the tower of observation, taking my due turn. And sudden I heard the thrilling of the ether all about me, and the voice of Nani in my soul speaking. And I sent the master-word into the darkness of the world, and presently I heard the solemn answer beating steadfastly in the night. And immediately I called to Nani with my brain elements, to know what thing troubled her in her sleep. And her voice came into my spirit, weak and far and faint, and so that scarce I could make to hear the words. Yet in a while I gathered that all the peoples of the Lesser Redoubt were in very deadly trouble, for that the earth current had failed suddenly and mightily, and they had called her from her sleep that she might listen whether we answered their callings by the instrument, but indeed no calling had come to us. And they, who had been of late so joyful, were now grown old with sorrow in but an hour or two, for they feared that the fresh coming of the earth current had been but the final flicker and outburst before the end. And even in this short while of our speech did it seem to me that the voice of Nani grew further off from me, and I felt to have broken my heart with the trouble of this thing. And through all that remained of that sleep-time did I converse with Nani, as might two lovers who shall presently part forever. And when the cities awoke, the news went throughout them, and all our millions were in sorrow and trouble. And thus it was for maybe a little month, and in that time had the voice of Nani grown so weak and far off that even I that had the night hearing could scarce make real its meaning. And every word was to me a treasure and a touch upon my soul, and my grief and trouble before this certain parting drove me that I could not eat neither have rest, and this did the Master Monstruaken take upon him to chide and correct, for that if any were to help, how should it be done if I that had the night hearing, and heard even now that the recording instruments were dumb, come to ill health? And because of this, and such wisdom as was mine, I made to eat and order my life that I might have my full powers. Yet was this beyond all my strength. For presently I knew that the people of the Lesser Pyramid were threatened by the monsters that beset them, and later I had knowledge from faint, far words whispered in my brain that there had been a fight with an outside force that had harmed many in their minds, so that in madness they had opened the gate and had run from the Lesser Pyramid, out into the darkness of the lands about them. And there had their physical bodies fallen to the monsters of those lands, but of their souls who may know? And this we set assuredly to the failure of the earth current, which had robbed them of all force and power, so that in those few weeks all life and joy of living had left them, and neither hunger nor thirst had they much, nor any great desire to live, but yet a new and mighty fear of death. And this doth seem very strange. And, as may be thought, all this made the peoples of the Great Redoubt think newly of the earth current that issued from the crack beneath the pyramid, and of their latter end, so that much was writ in the hour-slips concerning this matter. Yet in the main to assure us that we ourselves might each be free from a disturbed heart, though some went foolishly to the other event, and spoke of a speedy danger to us likewise, as is ever the way. But the truth of our own case lay, maybe, somewhere between. And all the hour-slips were full also of imaginings of the terror of those poor humans out in the darkness of the world, facing that end which must come upon all, even upon our mighty pyramid, though, as most would believe, so far away in some future eternity that we have no cause to trouble. And there were sad poems writ to the peoples of the Lesser Redoubt, and foolish plans set about to rescue them, but none to put them to effect, and no way by which so great a thing might be done, and doth but show how loosely people will speak out of an over-security. Yet to me there had come a certain knowledge that I must make the adventure, though I achieved naught save mine own end. Yet it were better to cease quickly, than that I should feel as now I did feel. That same night, in the 18th hour, there was a great disturbance in the ether about the mighty pyramid, and I was awakened suddenly by the master Monstruaken, that I might use my gift of the night hearing to hearken for the throbbing of the master word, which they had thought to come vaguely through the instruments, but no one of the Monstruakens was sensitive enough of soul to account truly whether this was so. And lo, as I sat up in bed, there came the sound of the master word, beating in the night about the pyramid, and immediately there was a crying in the ether all about me, "We are coming! We are coming!" And mine inwards leapt and sickened me a moment, so shaken was I with a sudden belief. For the message seemed someways to come to me from very near to the great redoubt, as that they who sent it were nigh to hand. And forthwith I called the master word into the night. But no answer did there come for a while, and then a faint thrilling of the ether about me, and the weak pulse of the master word in the night, sent by a far voice, strangely distant. And I knew that the voice was the voice of Nani. And I put a question through all the darkness of the dead world, whether she were within the lesser redoubt and safe thus far. And presently there came a faint disturbance about me, and a small voice in my soul, speaking weakly and out of an infinite distance, and I knew that far away through the night Nani spoke feebly, with her brain elements, and that she abode within the lesser pyramid, but that she too had heard the strange pulse of the master word in the night, and that message, "We are coming! We are coming!" And vastly had this thing disturbed her, waking her within her sleep, so that she knew not what to think, save that we were devising some method to come to them. But this I removed from doubt, saying that she must not build on vain hoping, for I would not have her doubly tortured by the vanity of such believing. And thereafter, having said such things as I might, though few they were to comfort her, I bade her gently to sleep, and turned therewith to the master Monstruaken, who waited in quiet patience, and had no knowledge of that which I had heard and sent, for his hearing was but the normal, though his brain and heart were such as made me to love him. And I told the master Monstruaken many things as I put my clothing about me, how that there had indeed been the calling of the master word, but not by any of that lesser redoubt, but that to my belief it had come from nigh about the great pyramid. Moreover, it was sent by no instrument, as I wotted that he did guess, but as it seemed to me by the brain elements of many calling in unison. And all this did I set out to the master Monstruaken, and with something uncertain of fear and trouble in my heart, yet with a blind expectation, as, indeed, who would not? Though no longer was I shaken by that first thought of her nearness. And I said to the master Monstruaken that we should go to the tower of observation and search the nightlands with the great spy-glass. And we did this, and lo, presently we saw a great number of men pass over the electric circle that went about the pyramid. Yet they came not to us, but went outwards and towards the blackness and the strange fires and hideous mysteries of the nightland. And we ceased from spying and looked swiftly at one another, and knew in our hearts that some had left the mighty pyramid in the sleep-time. Then the master Monstruaken sent word to the master watchman that his wardership had been outraged, and that people left the great pyramid in the sleep-time, for this was against the law, and none ever went out into the nightland, save the full watch were posted to the great door, and at a due time, when all were wakeful, for the opening of the great door was made known to all the millions of the great redoubt, so that all might be aware, and know that no foolishness was done without their wotting. Moreover, ere any had power to leave the pyramid, they must pass the examination and be prepared, and some of this have I set out already. And so stern was the framing of the law that there was yet the metal pegs upon the inner side of the great gate, where had been stretched the skin of one who had disobeyed, and was flayed and his hide set there to be a warning in the early days. Yet the tradition was remembered, for, as I might say it, we lived very close about the place, and memory had no room whereby she might escape. Now the master watchman, when he heard that which the master Monsterwaken had to tell, went hastily with some of the central watch from the watch-dome to the great gate, and he found the men of the sleep-time watch with the warder of the gate all bound and stopped in the mouth, so that none could make outcry. And he freed them, and learned that nigh 500 young men from the upper cities, by the bigness of their chests, had come upon them suddenly, and bound them, and escaped into the night through the eye-gate in the top of the great gate. And the master watchman was angry, and demanded why that none had called by the instruments of the watch-house. But lo, some had made to call thus, and found them unable to wake the recorders which lay in the central watch-dome, for there had been tampering. Now, after this, they made certain new rules and laws concerning the order of watching, and made tests of the lesser instruments of the inward pyramid nightly upon the coming of the sleep-time, which was, even in that strange age, by tradition called night, as I have given hint, though hitherto, until the way of my story was known, I have used a word for the sleep-hours that was yet not of that time, but somewhat an invention to make this history free from the confusion of night and day, when in truth it was always night without upon the world. Yet after this shall I keep to mine use the luxury of the true names of that time, and yet how strange is it that the truth should be of so little to our thinking. And so to go forward with my telling, for though all this care were now taken, it had no force until afterward, and at this moment were those poor foolish youths out in all the danger of the Nightland, and no way by which they might be succoured or called back, save that fear or wisdom should come to them quickly, that they cease from so wild an attempt. For it was to make rescue of those in that other unknown pyramid out in all the darkness of the world's night that was their intent, as we had speedy knowledge from those boon friends that had been in the secret of their plot, which had seemed to them great and heroic, and was so in verity, but that neither they who went nor they who stayed had a true awareness of the danger they had dealing with, being all naught but raw and crude youths, yet doubtless with the makings of many fine and great men among them. And because some had thus abetted that which they knew to be against the law, which was framed to the well-being and safety of all, there were certain floggings which might the better help their memories in the future as to the properness of their actions and wisdom. Moreover, they who returned, if any, would be flogged, as seemed proper after due examination, and though the news of their beatings might help all others to hesitation ere they did foolishly in like fashion, yet was the principle of the flogging not on this base, which would be both improper and unjust, but only that the one in question be corrected to the best advantage for his own well-being. For it is not meet that any principle of correction should shape to the making of human signposts of the pain for the benefit of others. For in verity this were to make one pay the cost of many's learning, and each should owe to pay only so much as shall suffice for the teaching of his own body and spirit. And if others profit thereby, this is but accident, however helpful. And this is wisdom, and denoteth now that a sound principle shall prevent practice from becoming monstrous. Yet now I must hasten to set down how it fared with those 500 youths that had made so sad an adventure of their lives and unprepared souls, and were beyond our aid to help them, who might not so much as make any calling to them, to bid them to return. For to do this would have been to tell all the monsters of the land that humans were abroad from the mighty pyramid. And this would have been to cause the monsters to search the youths out to their destruction, and maybe even to awaken the forces to work them some dread spiritual harm, which was the chief fear. Now presently, through all the cities of the great redoubt, the news had gone how that 500 foolish youths had adventured out into the despair of the Nightland, and the whole pyramid waked to life, and the peoples of the south came to the northern sides, for the great gate lay in the north-west side, and the youths had made from there, not straightly outwards but towards the north, and so were to be seen from the north-east embrasures, and from those within the north-west wall. And thus in a while were they watched by all the mighty multitudes of the great pyramid, through millions of spy-glasses. For each human had a spying-glass, as may be thought, and some were an 100 years old, and some maybe 10,000, and handed down through many generations, and some but newly made, and very strange. But all those people had some instrument by which they might spy out upon the wonder of the Nightland. For so had it been ever through all the eternity of darkness, and a great diversion and wonder of life was it to behold the monsters about their work, and to know that they plotted always to our destruction, yet were ever foiled. And never did all that great and terrible land grow stale upon the soul of any, from birth until death. And by this you shall know the constant wonder of it, and that sense of enemies in the night about us, which ever fill the heart and spirit of all beholders, so that never were the embrasures utterly empty. Yet many beheld not the land from the embrasures, but sat about the view-tables, which were set properly in certain places throughout the cities, and so beheld the Nightland without undue cranings or poising of spy-glasses, though less plain seen. And these same tables were some form of that which we of this age name camera obscura, but made very great, and with inventions, and low to the floor, so that 10,000 people might sit about them in the raised galleries and have comfortable sight. Yet this attracted not the young people, save they were lovers, and then in truth were they comfortable seats for quietness and gentle whisperings. Yet now, as may be supposed, with all the peoples of the mighty pyramid grown eager to look towards one part of the Nightland, the embrasures were hid in the crowds, and such as could gain no view therethrough thronged about the view-tables. And so was it in all the hours of leisure, so that women had scarce patience to attend their children, but must hasten to watch again that lonesome band of foolish youths, making so blind and unshaped a trial to come upon that unknown lesser doubt somewhere out in all the night of the world. End of Chapter 4, Part 1. Chapter 4, Part 2 of The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Nightland. Chapter 4. The Hushing of the Voice, Part 2. And in this wise passed 3 days and nights, yet both in the sleep-time and the time of waking did great multitudes cease not to watch, so that many went hungry for sleep, as in truth did I. And sometimes we saw those youths with plainness, but other times they were lost to our sight in the utter shadows of the Nightland. Yet by the telling of our instruments and the sense of my hearing, there was no awareness among the monsters and the forces of evil that any were abroad from the pyramid, so that a little hope came into our hearts that yet there might be no tragedy. And times would they cease from their way, and sit about in circles among the shadows and the grey moss-bushes, which grew hardly here or there about. And we knew that they had food with them to eat, for this we could see with plainness, as some odd, grim flare of light from the infernal fires struck upon one or another strangely, and passed, and left them in the darkness. And who of you shall conceive what was in the hearts of the fathers and the mothers that bore the youths, and who never ceased away from the northward embrasures, but spied out in terror and in tears, and maybe oft with so good glasses as did show them the very features and look upon the face of a son and son. And the kin of the watchers brought to them food, and tended them, so that they had no need to cease from their watching. And beds were made in the embrasures, rough and resourceful, that they might sleep quickly a little, yet be ever ready, if those cruel monsters without made discovery of those their children. Thrice in those 3 days of journeying to the northward did the youth sleep, and we perceived that some kept a watch, and so knew that there was a kind of order and leadership among them. Also they had each his weapon upon his hip, and this gave to us a further plea to hope. And concerning this same carrying of weapons, I can but set out here that no healthful male or female in all the mighty pyramid but possessed such a weapon, and was trained to it from childhood, so that a ripe and extraordinary skill in the use thereof was common to most. Yet some breaking of rule had there been, that the youths had each achieved to be armed, for the weapons were stored in every 10th house of the cities, in the care of the charging masters. And here I must make known that these weapons did not shoot, but had a disk of grey metal, sharp and wonderful, that spun in the end of a rod of grey metal, and were someways charged by the earth current, so that there were any but stricken thereby they were cut in twain so easy as aught. And the weapons were contrived to the repelling of any army of monsters that might make to win entrance to the redoubt, and to the eye they had somewhat the look of strange battle-axes, and might be lengthened by the pulling out of the handles. Now the youths made, as I have told, to the northward, but had first to keep a long way to the northeast, that they might come clear of the veil of red fire. And this wise they journeyed, and kept the veil about 7 miles to the northwest of them, and so were presently beyond the watcher of the northeast, and going with a greater freedom, and having less care to hide. And this way, it may be, certain of the giants, wandering, perceived them, and went swiftly to make attack and destroy them. But some order went about among the youths, and they made a long line, with a certain space between each, because of the terror of their weapon, and immediately it seemed the giants were upon them. 67 they were, and seeming to be haired like to mighty crabs, as I saw with the great spy-glass, when the great flares of far and mighty fires threw their fierce light across the dark lands. And there was a very great and horrid fight, for the youths broke into circles about each of the giants, and many of those young men were torn in pieces, but they smote the monsters from behind and upon every side, and we of the mighty pyramid could behold at times the grey, strange gleam of their weapons. And the ether was stirred about me by the passing of those that died. Yet by reason of the great miles, their screams came not to us, neither heard we the roars of the monsters, but into our hearts, even from that great distance and safety, there stole the terror of those awesome brutes. And in the great spy-glass I could behold the great joints and limbs, and even, I thought, the foul sweat of them, and their size and brutishness was like to that of odd and monstrous animals of the olden world, yet part human. And it must be borne to mind that the fathers and mothers of those youths beheld all this dread fight from the embrasures, and their other kin likewise watched, and a very drear sight was it to their hearts and their human natural feelings, and like to breed old age ere its due. Then in a time the fight ceased, for of those 27 giant brutes there remained none, only that there cumbered the ground 27 lumbering hillocks, dreadful and grim. For the lesser dead we could not see proper. And we that were within the pyramid saw the youths sorted together by their leaders, all in the dim twilight of that place. And with the great spy-glass I made a rough count, and found that there lived of them 300. And by this shall you know the power of those few monstrous things, which had slain full 200, though each youth was armed with so wondrous a weapon. And I set the word through the pyramid that all might have some knowledge of the number that had died, for it was better to know than to be in doubt, and no spy-glass had the power of the great spy-glass. After this fight the youths spent a time having a care to their bodies and wounds, and some were made separate from the others, and of these I counted upon 50. And whilst the others made to continue their march towards the road where the Silent Ones walk, these were constrained by one who was the leader to return to the pyramid. And in a little I saw that they came towards us, wearily and with many a halt, as that they suffered great wounds and the harm of fight. But those others, maybe 250 youths, went onwards into the Nightland, and though we sorrowed at this thing, yet was there come a huge pride into our hearts, that those raw ones, who yesterday were but children, had so held themselves in the battle and done a great deed that day. And I wot that whilst their mothers wept easeless, their fathers' hearts swelled within them, and held somewhat of their pain away from them for a time. And all this while those wounded youths came slowly, and rested, and came on again, the better helping the worse. And a great excitement and trouble there was in all the mighty pyramid, to learn which were they that came, and they that went, and who lay out there quietly among the slain. But none might say anything with surety, for even with that great spy-glass in the tower of observation they were not over plain, save when some light from the fires of the land flared high, and lit them. For they stood not up into the glare of the fires, as had the giants, and though I saw them with clearness, yet I knew them not, for there was so mighty a multitude in that vast redoubt that none might ever know the half even of their rulers. And about this time there came a fresh matter of trouble to our minds, for one of the Monstruacans made report that the instruments were recording an influence abroad in the night, so that we had knowledge that one of the evil forces was out. And to me there came an awareness that a strange unquiet stole over the land. Yet I knew it not with mine ears, but my spirit heard, and it was as though trouble and an expectation of horror did swarm about me. And once, listening, I heard the master-word beating strangely low, and I knew the ether to thrill about me, and a faint stirring was there in my soul, as of a faint voice speaking. And I knew that Nani called to me some message across the night of the world, yet weak and coming without clear meaning, so that I was tormented and could but send comfort to her with my brain elements. And presently I knew that she ceased to speak. And later I heard that there was a new matter forward in the redoubt, for 10,000 men had assembled to attend the room of preparation for the short preparation, and by this we knew that those poor youths who stumbled towards us through the dark were presently to have help. And through all that sleep-time there went forward the spiritual and the physical preparation of the 10,000, and upon the morrow they slept, whilst 100,000 made ready their arms. And in this space of time the 250 youths that went towards the road where the Silent Ones walk had come very nigh thereto, having gone very warily and with some slowness, because, as may be, of the lesson of the giants. And to us in the pyramid the instruments made known constantly that influence which was abroad, and which all those of the tower of observation thought to proceed from the house of silence. Yet nothing could we see with the great spy-glass, and so could come to no sure knowing, but only to fear and wonder. And presently the youths were upon the great road, and turned to the northward. And beyond them, a great way, stood the house of silence, upon a low hill at a certain distance to the right of the road. By now they that were wounded had come to within maybe 15 miles of the great redoubt, and the news went through all the cities that the 10,000 men that were prepared made to arm themselves. And I went down by the tower lift and saw them come down by thousands from the room of preparation, and none might go nigh to them or cause them to speak, for they were made ready, and were, as it might be, holy. And all the millions of the Great Pyramid stood in their cities about certain of the main lifts, and watched those thousands go downwards, all in their armour of grey metal, and each one armed with the discos, which was that same very terrible weapon which all had training to. And I doubt not but that the young men of the pyramid looked with longing in their hearts that they might have been among those that went forth to succour. Yet the older men had graver thoughts in their hearts, for the blood ran more soberly in them, and they had knowledge and memory of the peril. And by this I would make clear that I speak less of the peril of the body, which is common to every state of life, but of the peril of the spirit. And it may be thought by those of this age that it was most strange that they of that, having all the knowledge of eternity to aid them, had no weapon by which to shoot and kill at a distance. But indeed this had not been so in the past, as our histories did show. For some wondrous weapons there had been, that might slay without sound or flash at a full score miles and more. And some we had whole within the great museum, and of others but the parts in decay, for they had been foolish things and reckless to use. For we of that great pyramid wanted not to kill a few of the monsters that lay at a great distance, but only those which came nigh to harm us. And concerning those same weapons that killed silently at a great distance, we had now little knowledge, save that they did not waste the earth-current, and no practice had we concerning their workings. For it was maybe 100,000 years gone that they had been used, and found to be of no great worth in a close attack, and harmful otherwise to the peace, in that they angered, unneedful, the forces of that land, slaying wantonly those monsters which did no more than beset the mighty redoubt at a great distance. For, as may be seen by a little thought, we did very gladly keep a reasonable quietness, and refrain from aught that should wake that land, for we were born to the custom of that strange life, and lived and died in peace for the most part, and were very content to have security, and to be neutral in all things that did not overbear us, but as it were always armed and ready. But concerning the great and evil forces that were abroad in the Nightland, these we had no power to harm, nor could we hope for more than that we had security from them, which indeed we had. But the hugeness of their power was about us, and we dared not to wake it, save through such extremity as had come to pass by this folly of the youths, though even now we had no thought to attack aught, but only to succour those wounded ones. And concerning this simplicity of weapons, which excites somewhat even my wonder in this our present age, it may be that the powers of chemistry were some ways quaintly limited by conditions in that age, and there to be always a need to spare the earth-current, and hence, by this cause and by that, we were brought, by the extreme, nigh to the simplicity of the early world, yet with a strange and mighty difference, as all may know who have read. Now presently the word was sent to every city throughout the great redoubt, as was the law, that the great gate should be opened, and each city sent its master to form the full watch, as was the law. And each went clad in grey armour, and carrying the discos, and the full watch numbered 2,000, for there were also the watchmen. Then the lights in the great causeway were made dim, so that the opening of the gate could cast no great glare from within into the Nightland to tell the Watcher of the Northwest and all the monsters that certain humans went out from the mighty pyramid. But whether the vast and hidden forces of evil had knowledge we knew not, and they who went must but chance it, remembering that they were prepared and had the capsule. And the 10,000 that were prepared went out through the great gateway into the night, and the full watch stood back from them and spoke no word, but saluted silently with the discos, and they that went raised each discos a little and passed out into the dark. Then the great gate was shut, and we made to wait and to watch, with trouble and expectation within our hearts. And at the embrasures many did comfort the women of those men. And I went back, upwards by miles, until I came to the Tower of Observation, and I looked out from there into the Nightland, and saw that the 10,000 halted at the circle, and made arrangement of themselves, and sent some before and upon either hand, and so went forward into the Nightland. And after that I went to the great spyglass, and turned it towards the 250 youths that were far off upon the road where the Silent Ones walk. Yet for a while I could not perceive them, for all the road seemed empty. But afterward I saw them, and they were clambering back into the road, having gone aside, as I thought, because of the passing of one of those silent ones, that I saw now at a distance to the southward of them. There passed then some 3 hours, and in that time I varied my watching between those far-off youths and the 10,000 that went forward to succour the wounded, that were now, maybe, scarce 9 miles distant from the mighty pyramid, and the 10,000 came very close to them. And in truth, in a little while they spied one the other, and I gathered in spirit something of the rejoicing of those youths, yet weak and troubled were they because of their wounds and their knowledge of failure, and their disobedience of the law. And presently they were surrounded by the 10,000 and carried upon slings, and all that body swung round towards the pyramid and came back at a great pace. And in the same time I heard the sound that made them so swift to hasten, for there smote up through the night the baying of the hounds, and we knew that they were discovered. And I swept the great spyglass over the land towards the valley of the hounds, that I might discover them quickly, and saw them come lumbering, at a strange gallop, and great as horses, and it might be only 10 miles to the east. And I looked once upon the watcher of the north-east, and I saw and marvelled that the great bell-ear quivered constantly, and I knew that it had knowledge and gave signal to all the land. Then did one of the Monstruacans report that a new and terrible influence was abroad in the land, and by the instrument we had knowledge that it approached, and some of the Monstruacans called foolishly with weak voices to the 10,000 to haste, forgetting and desiring only their safety from that which came near. Then, looking with the great spyglass, I saw that there moved across the land, from the direction of the plain of blue fire, a mighty hump, seeming of black mist, and came with prodigious swiftness. And I called to the master Monstruacan that he come and look through one of the eyepieces that were about the great spyglass, and he came quickly, and when he had looked a while, he called to the Monstruacan that had made report, and the Monstruacan answered and replied that the influence drew nearer, by the reading of the instrument, yet of the thing itself the man had no sight. And I ceased not to look, and in a little while the humped thing passed downwards into the veil of red fire, which lay across the land that way. But I watched steadfastly, and presently I saw the black hump climb up from the veil of red fire upon this side and come through the night, so that in scarce a minute it had come half-way across that part of the night-land. And my heart stood quiet with fear and the utter terror of this monster, which I knew to be surely one of the great forces of evil of that land, and had power without doubt to destroy the spirit. And the master Monstruacan leapt towards the home-call, and sent the great sound down to the 10,000 that they might attend, and immediately he signalled to them to beware. But already I perceived that they knew of this utter danger that was upon them, for I saw them slay the youths quickly, that their spirits might not be lost, for they were unprepared. But the men, being prepared, had the capsule, and would die swiftly in the last moment. I looked again towards the hump, and saw that it came like a hill of blackness in the land, and was almost anigh. Then there happened a wonder. For in that moment, when all had else gone quickly, that they might save their souls, out of the earth there rose a little light, like to the crescent of the young moon of this early day. And the crescent rose up to an arch of bright and cold fire, glowing but little, and it spanned above the 10,000 and the dead, and the hump stood still, and went backwards, and was presently lost. And the men came swiftly towards the mighty pyramid. Yet ere they were come to safety, the baying of the hounds sounded close upon them, and they faced to the danger, yet, as I could know, without despair, because that they yet lived after so enormous a peril. And the hounds were very nigh, as now I beheld with the great spyglass, and I counted 50, running with mighty heads low and in a pack. And lo, as the hounds came at them, the 10,000 drew apart, and had a space between the men, that they might have full use of that terrible discos, and they fought with the handles at length, and I saw the discs spin and glisten and send out fire. Then was there a very great battle, for the light that arched above them and held away the power from their souls, made not to protect them from this danger of the lesser monsters. And at 100,000 embrasures within the mighty pyramid the women cried and sobbed and looked again. And in the lower cities it was told after that the peoples could hear the crash and splinter of the armor, as the hounds ran to and fro, slaying. Aye, even the sound of the armor between their teeth. Yet the 10,000 ceased not to smite with the discos, and they hewed the hounds in pieces. But of the men that went forth there were 1,700 slain by the hounds, ere the men won to victory. Then came that wearied band of heroes back to the home shelter of the vast redoubt, and they bore their dead with them, and the youths that they slew, and they were received with great honour and with exceeding grief and in a great silence, for the thing admitted naught of words until a time had passed. And in the cities of the pyramid there was mourning, for there had been no sorrow like unto this through mayhap 100,000 years. And they bore the youths to their mothers and to their fathers, and the father of each made thanks to the men that they had saved the soul of his son, but the women were silent. Yet neither to the father nor to the mother was ever made known the name of the slayers, for this might not be, as all shall see with a little thought. And some did remember that, in verity, all was due to the unwisdom of those youths, who had heeded not the law and their life-teachings. Yet had they paid to the uttermost and passed outwards, and the account of their deeds was closed. And all this while did great numbers spy toward the road where the Silent Ones walk, that they might watch that band of youths afar in the Nightland, who went forward amid those horrid dangers. Yet when the dead youths had been brought in, many had ceased to look out for a time, and had turned to questioning, and some had made inspection, that they might know which had come back, and which lay out there where the giants had slain them, or went forward to more dreadful matters. But who of those that were abroad, were slain, or still went onward, we had but indifferent knowledge, though the men of the 10,000 knew somewhat, having had speech with the wounded youths ere they slew them. And, as may be thought, these men were sorely questioned by the mothers and the fathers of those youths that were not accounted of, yet I doubt that few had much knowledge wherewith to console them. Now there was presently in the Garden of Silence, which was the lowermost of all the underground fields, the ending of those 1,700 heroes, and of the youths that they had saved and slew. And the garden was a great country, and 100 miles every way, and the roof thereof was 3 great miles above, and shaped to a mighty dome, as it had been that the builders and makers thereof did remember in their spirits the visible sky of this our present age. And the making of that country was all set out in a single history of 7,070 volumes, and there were likewise 7,070 years spent to the making of that country, so that there had unremembered generations lived and laboured and died, and seen not the end of their labour. And love had shaped it and hallowed it, so that of all the wonders of the world there has been none that shall ever come anigh to that country of silence, 100 miles every way of silence to the dead. And there were in that roof 7 moons set in a mighty circle, and lit by the earth-current, and the circle was 60 miles across, so that all that country of quiet was visible, yet to no great glare, but a sweet and holy light, so that I did always feel in my heart that a man might weep there and be unashamed. And in the midst of that silent country there was a great hill, and upon the hill a vast dome. And the dome was full of a light that might be seen in all that country, which was the Garden of Silence. And beneath the dome was the crack, and within it the glory of the earth current, from which all had life and light and safety. And in the dome at the north there was a gateway, and a narrow road went upward to the gateway, and the road was named the Last Road, and the gateway was named by no name, but known to all as the Gateway. And there were in that mighty country long roadways, and hidden methods to help travel, and constant temples of rest along the miles, and groves and the charm of water falling, and everywhere the statues of memory, and the tablets of memory, and the whole of that great underground country full of an echo of eternity and of memory and love and greatness, so that to walk alone in that land was to grow back to the wonder and mystery of childhood, and presently to go upwards again to the cities of the mighty pyramid, purified and sweetened of soul and mind. And in my boyhood I have wandered oft a week of days in that country of silence, and had my food with me, and slept quietly amid the memories, and gone on again wrapped about with the quiet of the everlasting. And the man-soul within would be drawn mightily to those places where the great ones of the past eternity of the world had their memory named. But there was that within me which ever drew me, in the ending, to the hills of the babes, those little hills where might be heard amid the lonesomeness of an utter quiet a strange and wondrous echo, as of a little child calling over the hills. But how this was I know not, save by the sweet cunning of some dead maker in the forgotten years. And here, mayhaps by reason of this voice of pathos, were to be found the countless tokens of memory to all the babes of the mighty pyramid, through 1,000 ages. And odd whiles would I come upon some mother, sitting there lonely, or mayhaps companied by others. And by this little telling shall you know somewhat of the quietness and the wonder and the holiness of that great country hallowed to all memory and to eternity and to our dead. And it was here, into the country of silence, that they brought down the dead to their burial. And there came down into the country of silence maybe 100,000,000 out of the cities of the pyramid to be present and to do honor. Now they that had charge of the dead did lay them upon the road which ran upward unto the gateway, even that same road which was named the Last Road. And the road moved upward slowly with the dead, and the dead went inward through the gateway, first the poor youths, and afterward they that had given up life that they might save them. And as the dead went upwards, there was a very great silence over all the miles of the country of silence. But in a little while there came from afar off a sound as of a wind wailing, and it came onwards out of the distance, and passed over the hills of the babes, which were a great way off, and so came anigh to the place where I stood. Even as the blowing of a sorrowful wind did it come, and I knew that all the great multitudes did sing quietly, and the singing passed onwards, and left behind it an utter silence, even as the wind doth rustle the corn, and pass onwards, and all fall to a greater seeming quietness than before. And the dead passed inward through the gateway, into the great light and silence of the dome, and came out no more. And again from beyond the far hills of the babes there was that sound of the millions singing, and there rose up out of the earth beneath the voices of the underground organs, and the noise of the sorrow passed over me, and went again into the distance, and left all hushed. And lo, as there passed inward to the silence of the dome the last of those dead heroes, there came again the sound from beyond the hills of the babes. And as it came more nigh, I knew that it was the song of honor, loud and triumphant, and sung by countless multitudes. And the voices of the organs rose up into thunder from the deep earth, and there was a great honor done to the glory of the dead, and afterwards once more a silence. Then did the peoples of the cities arrange themselves so that from every city whence had come a hero were the people of that city gathered together. And when they were so gathered, they set up tokens of memory to the dead of their city, but afterwards did charge artists to the making of sculpture great and beautiful to that same end, and now did but place tablets against that time. And afterwards the people did wander over that country of silence, and made visit and honour to their ancestors, if such were deserving. And presently the mighty lifts did raise them all to the cities of the pyramid, and thereafter there was something more of usualness, save that ever the embrasures were full of those that watched the youths afar upon the great road. And in this place I to remember how that our spy-glasses had surely some power of the earth-current to make greater the impulse of the light upon the eye. And they were like no spy-glass that ever you did see, but oddly shaped and to touch both the forehead and the eyes, and gave wonderful sight of the land. But the great spy-glass to be beyond all this, for it had the eyes of it upon every side of the mighty pyramid, and did be truly an huge machine. And to me, as I went about my duties or peered forth through the great spy-glass at the youths upon the road where the Silent Ones walk, there came at times a far faint thrilling of the ether, so that sometimes I was aware that there was the beating of the master-word in the night, but so strange and weak that the instruments had no wotting of it. And when this came, then would I call back through all the everlasting night to Nani, who was indeed Murdath, and I would send a master-word with my brain elements, and afterwards such comfort as I might. Yet hard and bitter was the truth of my helplessness and weakness, and the utter terror and might of the evil forces and monsters of the Nightland, so that I was like to have brake my heart with pondering. And the silence would come again, and anon the weak thrilling of the ether, but no more the far voice speaking in my soul. End of Chapter 4, Part 2.